Like that?
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about Jesus.
All right.
So you said you're a follower of Jesus. That's what gives life a purpose. How does that work?
A lot of it's mainly just the relationship with the Lord.
Okay.
Like, like some people would say, "Oh, Christianity is just a thing where you just do certain things." When in reality, many Christians do those things because they love Jesus and they want to be more like Him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what does it mean to love Jesus? Because He died like 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, He did, but that was more of a sacrifice, and then He resurrected soon after that. So,
Okay.
like, don't get me wrong, His death was a very big part of His life, but.
So how can we love someone that we can't really see? Like the same way I love my wife or my dad or my mom. How can I love Jesus if He's not around?
I will admit that is tough, and that's why it can sometimes be a bit tough for me to love Jesus personally. Just it's easy to forget about Him when He's not right in front of you.
Well, is He around?
Yeah,
okay.
I believe so.
In what way?
I'd say like a good comparison would be like kind of like the wind. You know it's there, you know it's blowing against you, but you can't really describe it.
Yeah, I'd say I've heard that before. I've actually heard the Holy Spirit being described as the wind.
Yeah, they both are really good comparisons. I'd say, usually if you're talking about the Holy Spirit, you're talking about Jesus as well.
Yes, Trinity, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So, let's see. So, in Christianity, how do we derive morals? Like, because obviously we can't just follow the Old Testament law. That's, there's the kind of new covenant that I think you've probably talked about.
I wouldn't
before,
say
so.
the New Testament contradicts the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But I do see what you mean with like the New Testament adding on some things to the Old Testament that can shake the rules up a bit.
So how do we derive morality from the Bible or from Christianity?
I think a big part of it is one, knowing that God's the ultimate good, and two, like striving to be more like Him.
Okay, and that I guess would take the form of striving to be more like Christ.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what does that look like to you? Like, how do you strive to be more like Christ? Like, because you can't go like hang yourself on a cross.
No,
and
we're not even supposed to do that.
And a lot of the stories, like, are, they are descriptive, but they're also a little bit like vague in certain places.
You could say that with every story, I think.
Oh yeah, sure you can. But it's
I
hard.
do know what you mean, though, like with the significance of this story. That can get annoying.
And they're really powerful. They're really powerful, and there's a lot to them. I'm not trying to say that there's nothing there. I'm trying to imagine someone who's like, okay, how do I imitate someone when I'm just kind of trying to piece together how they were based on the stories that I'm reading about them.
That's true.
So, like, how does that work?
I do think that's it's a big controversy nowadays with like many of the people. It's like, what do we know Jesus is like?
Yeah.
Personally, I cannot give an exact answer. I think reading the Bible is a good source because Jesus does get pretty descriptive on what's good and evil, and we could go off of that.
Yeah. Okay. And what
I cannot give you an exact answer.
Okay.
The best I could say is the Ten Commandments are a very good baseline. Like thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, which is basically thou shalt not lie. I believe there was one about envy, which was the 10th one. I don't remember the exact wording of it, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And what is all the law and the prophets? Right? Isn't that the golden rule?
Could you repeat that?
I just remember Jesus when he was asked, like, if something about the 10 Commandments. I don't remember the exact question he was asked, but
you're saying something about the golden rule?
Yeah.
I think
that's
he goes
why he extracted it out of the law.
Right. I think he went a bit further than the golden rule. Where, the average golden rule is treat how you want to be treated. I think Jesus said instead it should be more like treat how you want other people to be treated. Like people.
Yeah. I think it was love God with all your heart and treat others the way you would want to be treated. Do unto others as you would be as you would have done to you or something like that.
I mean, I might be thinking about something completely different then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a very good moral to live by. But as I was saying,
How do you do that? Oh, go on with what you were saying. I don't hear.
oh yeah, but as I was saying, it's more like treat other people how you want them to treat others. I could make fun of my friend and say, oh, yeah, you can make fun of me back. We're friends. But if he does that to another stranger, that doesn't have it's a lot less desirable.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of complexity there.
Right.
How do you live by that summation of the commandments? Love God with all your heart and treat other people as you.
I think the best thing I can tell you is just not to jump to judgments.
Okay, judgment.
If you keep an open mind, always assume the best out of people and situations, you'll generally go far with that.
Why shouldn't you judge people?
I said don't jump to judgments.
No, I said why shouldn't you jump to judgments?
Oh. The big thing is that you don't know everything.
Okay.
And even if you do, it's very possible that what you do know could be false.
That's fair. Because we are limited.
Right.
Okay. I guess I'll ask this. How do we know that we're interpreting the Bible correctly? Because every church seems to have a different interpretation. Where's the authority come from to interpret Scripture?
That's true. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't believe I've gotten that far yet. I don't know. A lot of churches will generally tell you, listen to the Lord and hear what He tells you. But even from that, people tend to come up with different ideas. So I'm not too sure. That's my best answer, I'm afraid.
Honestly, that's probably a good answer. Let me think. All right. Let's see. So there was a commercial during the Super Bowl. Do you remember the one about Jesus?
It's been a while.
Okay. So there's a commercial depicting Jesus, or not Jesus, but other people.
Oh yeah, I think of shining the shoes of other people.
Like washing their feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like washing the feet of people at Planned Parenthood, washing the feet of I think rioters and stuff.
Right. I think I understand where you're going.
So is that a correct depiction of Jesus? Or a depiction of what Jesus would do?
That one's a bit tough. I do think that we should be a bit more like that, where we should be more compassionate towards people we don't agree with in that department. But as for would Jesus go out and wash their feet? That's a bit tough.
Yeah.
I think of back to I forgot where exactly it was in the Bible, but it was near the end where Jesus went to this temple and there was a bunch of merchants around the temple. That made him basically very mad, and he tossed tables and kicked them all out of the temple. I think of something like that, and I don't think now I think about it, it's not the best comparison, because I think the big thing was that they were in the temple doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the Planned Parenthood and rioters, they're just out in the streets. So my best answer to that is probably.
Okay, so you think he would, but isn't abortion wrong?
Yes.
So would he not speak against it as well?
He would.
Okay. But you think there's a certain compassion as well?
Abortion is wrong, but I don't hold anything towards the people doing hate the sin, not the sinner sort of deal.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. That's a good way to put it. I'm not saying we should hate anyone.
No.
Yeah. So, but washing the feet, isn't that some kind of? It seems like a symbolic image. It's almost like a servant heart.
Yeah, it is. It's servant hearted.
It's the servant leader kind of image, and so I don't know if if he's leading those people and they don't turn from their ways, it's like,
true.
how can you lead someone if they're not following you?
Right.
Right? And so it seems like the image breaks down for me. I just don't see how it would work.
I think the alternative is that you don't lead them and they won't change their way at all. So yeah, it is terrible that you try your best to lead these people away from that sort of thing and they don't change. But that literally is the alternative literally is you don't lead them and they won't change at all.
Yeah, you don't try.
It's not trying.
That's fair. Okay. So these are good questions. I guess
very fun.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you can leave whenever you want, by the way. So,
right.
How do you think Revelation will unfold?
Oof, you mean the Revelations, the book?
Yeah, the book.
Oof. I did read over it recently, and definitely very symbolic. Honestly, I do not think that Revelations is going to happen anytime soon.
When it does happen, is it going to happen in the same way as, like, if I'm brushing my teeth or making dinner, like this, the same kind of...
I certainly do think it'll come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, I might as well be wrong, but...
What? And that might have been a confusing thing to say out of context, but, like, there's different stories that we can tell, right? Some stories we can tell about, like, the breakfast I had this morning, or what happened when I walked here. Very, like, tangible stories that happened, like, it happened a day ago, like really recently. But there's other stories that are more symbolic, like you were saying. And so, like, where does the rubber hit the road with the story of Revelation, in your opinion? Like, what parts of it will actually interact with us in the same way as the story of me brushing my teeth?
I see what you mean now. That's a bit of a tough one. I think we can get some more of the exact things down. I do think the rapture will happen, where many of the Christ followers will rise into heaven early. And then the tribulations, I believe a lot of that will be reminiscent on the plagues of Egypt at the time. Like very, very reflective on those. And then I do believe the Antichrist figure will show, but I don't think he'll show himself before the rapture.
Okay. So it sounds like it's going to happen pretty similarly to how it's described, like in the sense of brushing my teeth.
I do believe so, yes. I'm mainly just describing what we'll probably experience down on Earth anyways.
Okay. So, that's fair. Do you think
Revelations does have a lot of symbolism in it? And,
yeah, so it's probably hard to even pin it down.
Right.
I would say that's true. So, where do we get our truth from?
Ooh.
Like, how much of science can actually give us what is true? Or, I mean, where else do we find truth?
I think, when you bring up science, I think a lot of what science considers truth is that, is it repeatable and can you experience it? Like the whole thing with gravity. We can all believe that's a truth because we experience it and you can test it out and it'll show up correct. As for the Lord, I think a lot of that more comes from personal testimony.
Just pure experience.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else to do besides experience?
A lot of it does. The rest of it comes down to trust and faith.
Trust and faith in your experience, right?
No, trust and faith about what other people say. So, yeah.
Who is the other person in this scenario?
Could be anyone. Or it could be anything, like it could be a book, could be a person, could be a news article.
But you shouldn't trust what like a propagandist newspaper says, right?
Not really if they're a propagandist newspaper.
So what characteristics makes something trustworthy?
That I think I probably would go back to the whole repeatable thing, the experience.
Okay, so there's something empirically verifiable about what should be trustworthy?
Could you rephrase that?
Yeah, so is what is trustworthy? The question of what should I trust? Something we can test empirically based on, like you said, replicability and experience. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Is that something, basically using the scientific method, is that something we can do?
You can't use the scientific method on everything, but yes.
Okay. So what can't you use the scientific method on then?
I don't have any. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Okay. But how do we use the scientific method on like a symbolic story in the Bible? Like, how do we do that?
I guess that's one example. It says like symbolic stories. A lot of that's just more history accounts. I guess that's the other thing. It's like history books and all that. Like, we can't exactly repeat all that stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to use like particular tactics and try to find the historicity of something.
We can find remnants of them though, like the Roman Empire, and I don't think very recently, but somewhat recently, we found like Pontius Pilate, the person who crucified the Roman governor who crucified Jesus. We found him fairly recently.
Yeah, I heard of that too.
Yeah, I don't remember when. It might have just been the early 2000s, but I remember it was pretty big at the time.
Cool. Okay. So, what do you think about the COVID stuff? Do you think we needed to do that? Do you think masks should have been required? And
I don't mind about the masks. I don't care about the masks. Social distancing was kind of annoying. The big thing that I didn't like about COVID was, the lockdowns.
Okay.
So, basically, it was essential workers only, and everyone else just had to deal with the loss. That I did not. That I felt was completely unnecessary.
Okay. So why was it unnecessary? Because people want to say that, it's a super dangerous virus that's going to kill people.
I don't think it. And people might have thought about that back then, but now I think most people just feel coronavirus is just a very infectious. I don't want to say flu, but a very infectious flu.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it was very infectious, but I think the hospitality rate was very low. Somewhere in, let me do the math here. I'd say less than 10% at least.
Yeah, and maybe like a lot of the people that were being hospitalized had other
that too. A lot
co-occurring.
of it. The big thing with COVID was that it definitely made a lot of other diseases worse.
Yeah, sure.
So if you already had something else and you got COVID, you weren't gonna end up that pretty well.
Okay, so if it wasn't dangerous, do you think people, do you think they knew that it wasn't dangerous, or some of them did, or do you think they were fully convinced that it was going to be a deadly virus that was going to kill everybody?
I think people were just on the side of caution because it was a very infectious virus. They knew that already.
Yeah.
They didn't know how deadly it was, and if it was deadly, then it will have definitely changed the course of society.
Do you think there was a point, like maybe even slightly early on, where they could have come to the realization of its true lethality and that it might not be as dangerous as they are reacting to it to be?
I think so, yeah.
So why didn't they do that?
I think a big thing, one thing was that they were just pretty bad at getting data. Like a lot of the early deaths you could find with COVID were deaths of people with COVID and not deaths of people from COVID. I think it might still be like that now. Back then, if you died from something, they could just say, "Oh, they were immunocompromised from COVID, so the death was from COVID."
Yeah. Were they incentivized to do that? Like, were they incentivized to say that someone died from COVID?
I'm trying to remember if that was the case. I do not exactly.
I believe it was, actually. Like, I think hospitals did, in fact, get, like, grants for having higher rates of COVID death.
I was trying to remember if that was the case, but yeah. But that does sound about right.
So I guess I shouldn't ask the questions. I'm not trying to ask questions that I already know the answer to or anything.
That's fair.
That's probably not a bad. It's kind of a bad tactic, probably.
Yeah.
I guess I just really want to get at like if there's any corruption in this situation, because a lot of people think that there was. Like a lot of people think that.
I think there was too.
Yeah. Is that like why? What prompted that corruption? Was it money? Was it?
I think it was
something worse. Like what?
I think it was just pride.
Okay. How does that work?
I think the big thing was we all know that the coronavirus came from the Wuhan virology lab, right?
Probably.
I mean, well, that was pretty much set in stone by that point right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And yeah, a big point was that the CDC was funding that, and they wouldn't admit it was a gain of function. So the CDC did know about the coronavirus at that point, but they didn't want to say anything about it because they were doing stuff that was considered illegal at the time.
Okay, so there was kind of a cover-up of sorts, or was there something else involved? Was it political leverage? What was it?
I could see that with Donald Trump being a very controversial figure. I don't fully believe it was a cover-up. I do think that it was very convenient for people to pin politics to it, but I don't think at its core it was political.
Okay. So it wasn't at its core political. Then what would you say it was at its core? Prideful?
I'd just say they didn't want to admit they messed up.
Okay. They didn't want to admit they messed up. So you think it was just an act out of shame? Like they didn't want it to reach the public eye that they had made a mistake?
I believe so, yes.
But that does seem like quite a lot to do just out of shame, but I'm not sure.
You'd be surprised what people will do out of pride and shame.
That's fair. Well, what do you make of the vaccine then? Like, if it's not that, did they just make it just because they were feeding the story, or was there something else to the vaccine?
Oh, the vaccine? That one's I feel like it's a bit different. I think with the whole vaccine, there is a lot of controversy around it. Like, the whole Operation Warp Speed, there wasn't any sort of long-term studies on it. And then people started suspecting that it may have had side effects, and the whole discourse was basically just monitored. I'm not entirely sure about. I do believe that the vaccine was definitely rushed, specifically for financial reasons. But I personally don't know why. Well, actually, I think that might go back down to the whole CDC not wanting to admit their faults again. But
so it was shame too. Like they were just feeding the story.
I think that's the very root of it, but a big part of it was also finance.
They made money off of it.
Yeah, they made a lot. They made quite a bit of money off of it.
So, but why would they, if they were so shameful, why would they then start trying to make money off of it? If they were so ashamed?
One, it's money, and two, that's kind of what you have. It was either you make money off of it, just do it, or two, you're gonna make money off of it if you didn't say anything about it. It was just more of a outcome and more of a buffer. If that makes sense.
Well,
how would I describe it? Sorry, you go ahead. I'll think of something.
Okay, cool. Well, so they made a lot of money, it seems like, off of these vaccines. It almost seems like they made enough money to where it might incentivize them to make the same mistake again.
Huh?
Is that the case? Like,
something recent happened? Or?
No, I don't believe so. But like, do you think?
Oh, you mean like they made like the boosters or the second vaccine or what?
No, I'm talking about. It might be enough money to the point where they might be incentivized to, whoever they is, just make the same mistake over again. You know? And
I think I know what you mean.
Would anyone in the CDC or any government official or anybody like that, would they ever do something like this on purpose in order just to make money?
Maybe, but that's the thing. I don't think anyone would do this sort of thing, like purposely unleash a virus onto the world just to make money off of it. I don't think anyone's that low.
Well, what if the virus doesn't really kill anyone? And they can convince everyone that it does.
Yeah, that's true. You'd still have to make the virus annoying, though. You still have to make them like sick, like they cough a bit. You got to do something like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, it could just spiral to being, it will kill people.
So no one has that kind of foresight, and no one has that kind of skill.
And no one has any of that.
That's probably a fair argument.
So that is the big thing. Like, I don't think coronavirus would have been as big as shattering as it was without that politics in it. But that was just more fuel to the fire.
Okay.
If that happens under Joe Biden, I think it would just be considered just a normal cough, just like get this vaccine, life goes on, sort of deal.
Yeah, you would hope. Okay, well, let's take a quick turn. What do you make of transgenderism?
That is a touchy subject.
Yeah, it is. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. You can just say no answer.
It's my big thing is, where do I begin? I guess I'll start with something. I'll just start with how I personally feel. I do get the idea of not being comfortable in your own body and your own gender or sex, but I don't feel like changing that sort of thing is what's going to make you feel better.
What's going to make you feel better?
I think a lot of it's just more accepting, like coming to terms with who you are, accepting that, instead of trying to get surgeries to change yourself.
Because you might not be able to change yourself, is that right?
Yeah, and I've seen people do that, and then the goalpost just shifts. Like, oh, now I'm wrong in this way, I'm wrong in that way.
Okay.
It just seems to be a bit of a downward spiral, trying to chase something you'll never get.
So, what is the source of that dilemma that people run into, which seems to be more and more common, in which they feel as though they're in the wrong body? What is the source of that?
Well, I've actually had a experience with a friend who was kind of almost did that, where one of his friends came out as transgender. He's not the very most mentally sound guy. I personally think he's got bipolar, but he doesn't have enough money to get diagnosed. And he thought, well, if my friend did this and he looks and acts a lot better, maybe I should do it too.
Okay.
Thankfully, he didn't go through with that, but I think that a lot of people do end up going down that road, and that's why the rate is fairly high.
So,
especially with how often transgenderism is celebrated.
So it sounds like it's what a psychologist might call a social pathogen.
Yeah, like a social contagion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has been going around quite a bit. It is a bit of a theory, though. I don't think it's been looked into that much.
Okay.
Partly, no one really wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole. It's one of the bigger reasons.
Yeah, why is that? Like, why aren't we allowed to touch that with a 10-foot pole?
I think the big part is the proponents of transgenderism. Like, if you say that, oh, I don't think this is right, they immediately go into their existence and who they are their self-worth as a person. Like,
Yeah.
no one is saying anything about you as a person or like anything like that. We're just saying that we believe that this sort of condition needs a lot more looking into than just what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so it seems to be a part of the maintenance of their identity.
It's
something like that.
It's like when you come up with a new technology to help deaf people. The deaf community gets very offended, saying like, I am who I am because I'm deaf, but no, a lot of people don't want to be deaf. A lot of people would want that changed.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's to be done about it? Should we touch it with a 10-foot pole? Should we touch it with a shorter pole?
We kind of have to. We kind of have to if we want to go forwards in this.
Yeah. How do we go
How do
we go about it? Because we can't let it consume everything, can we?
I think we just have to have more discussions about it. That's it. That's where it's got to start.
Yeah.
We got to facilitate more discussions. We got to have more, good faith discussions about it. I have seen like those sorts of talks derail.
What do they derail into? Just pure emotional discourse?
I think people. I wouldn't say it does that sometimes, but a lot of times people just change the subject because no one really wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, I think it was yesterday, there was the whole thing over there with the pro-life presentation. And a lot of the discussions were had, they tend to just talk about other things. No one really wants to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it either, so I can't say I'm above it.
But the thing is that a lot of people are thinking about it.
Right.
And so if a lot of people are thinking about it and no one's talking about it, you almost think it's going to create something like...
It creates a divide.
Something like repression or rumination or something like that. And then division, too. Like, do you think there's... Like, what is your fear level of civil war?
I don't think civil war is going to happen.
Okay.
The only way that civil war is going to happen... I can only think of two ways that civil war is going to happen. One is, they always reference the frog in the boiling pot. And it's if somebody just takes a step too drastic in that direction. Or two, if, Or two is if people become less comfortable than what they are. Like a big reason why we won't do a civil war is because we're comfortable at what we are. We have a college education, we got a house, we got bills to pay, we have a job to work at.
Yeah.
If all that went away, I could see a lot more people willing to be in a civil war.
Okay. Yeah. Like, what if it does go away? What if people start getting, fired from their jobs because of political ideology?
If enough people, then definitely I do see a civil war happening.
Interesting. So you think?
But I think at that point it would just be more of a riot.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I guess there might be a line between the two. But you think once people's lifestyles start getting severely compromised, based on something like political ideology.
Based on anything, really.
Okay, so you don't think a civil war would be drawn from political ideology? What would it be drawn from?
I don't know. I just say that when people's lives drastically change, they do drastic things.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
I think political parties might do it, but I don't know if that'll be the entire reason.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think would be the defining separation between two sides of a civil war?
I think the best thing I can think of is people from rural areas like farmlands and the people from the cities.
Oh, well, there's a lot more people in cities.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's probably a dark question that might not need to be entertained.
I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Not that this is my chance to answer questions.
Did you see the Civil War movie that came out 2 weeks ago?
I never watched it.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't know if I will.
I think the general premise is that the president gave himself a third term. And apparently that got California and Texas against him. I think that's where that's how it started.
Yeah.
I really do not think a president could just give himself a third term. Like, somebody's gonna step in the way somewhere.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And if nobody does, then I don't think California or Texas are gonna be the ones to start the Civil War.
Yeah. I have I don't. It might not even be worth talking about. It's just kind of an interesting concept.
It is.
So, I've heard this before that telescopes and microscopes and planes have kind of distorted our perception a little bit.
Huh?
And not to mention televisions and the internet. But these things have kind of distorted our perception in the sense of, like, people are thinking about things that are happening far ways away, and they have defining opinions based on them, or maybe they conceive of the world as something made out of atoms, even though they've never really seen an atom before.
Right.
Or maybe they, see the Earth as something small and distant and meaningless just because we can look light years into our space.
Right.
And I don't know. Some of these things seem to be, exploratory and interesting, but it seems like some of them are having negative cultural problems, just in the sense of nihilism and other things that they might be feeding. Am I speaking nonsense, or what do you think about this distortion of perception in
I
society?
think you answered what I was going to say. I do feel like all these things are very useful, they're very helpful, and they help us understand things, but a lot of people base their lives too much on that. Like, it is good to have a more global focus on things, where it's like,
Yeah.
what's going on over there? Like, how can I help those guys out?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who care way too much about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And though I think that was the first time I've heard about, like, telescopes and microscopes, and that definitely was a lot more prevalent back in the day, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's still very prevalent now. It's like people say, "Oh, we're just atoms in the universe, and nothing really matters." Like, I do not understand where those people can come from.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to see any other atoms have an interview.
Yeah. Fair enough. So if I'm in some sense right in pointing out this distortion, then what is the correct way to perceive? Because if someone says the correct way to perceive is to not look into a microscope or not look online, I mean, that might be correct, but it might not be. Like, that seems a little bit restrictive. So how should we live? How should we see? How should we perceive in order to not be distorted? Like, what is the correct undistorted perception?
I think a big thing is just looking at where you are in relation to it. Like, if you look down to an atom, it's an atom, and you're you. You might be a bunch of atoms, but we all know that a bunch of atoms come together, they make something completely different.
Is that right? I mean, some people might not say that.
What do you mean?
Some people might say that if a bunch of atoms come together, they can just be conceived as a bunch of atoms.
I feel like that that makes it, dumbs it down a lot.
Okay. Do you think that it's accurate to say of yourself that you are made completely out of atoms?
I think you can say you're made completely out of atoms, but that doesn't get the whole picture. Again,
Okay. What's the whole picture?
the whole picture is what those atoms do.
Okay. But
And what does? Have you ever heard of emergence? I believe
yes.
it's like where a bunch of things come together and make something completely new. Yeah, I just said it. Whoops.
Yeah, that's the concept you're getting at.
I just didn't know if the whole interview
Yeah.
thing.
Oh no, don't worry about it. So
Yeah.
So it's funny because I would think that atoms might be a like level of resolution you can view the world as, but it might not be the lowest level.
You think there's something smaller than atoms?
Well, I just think that maybe the project of trying to find the lowest level of resolution is breaking down, especially with quantum theory.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
I just personally find that stuff fun, but I can certainly see the whole existentialism from it.
yeah. And so I understand the concept of emergence. I still think that the atom, while it may be a very real level of resolution, it seems to be based in a philosophical school, something like, I think his name was Democritus, who first conceived of the atom.
I'm not too familiar with that.
And so it seems like an interesting way to perceive the world, but it doesn't seem like it should be the only way to perceive the world.
No, and that's why I bring up emergence. Like, you're more than the sum of your parts. As odd as that may be, you're much more than just a bunch of atoms. Because of that,
How does emergence work?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a quantum scientist or whatever.
That's fair.
I think a lot. But yeah, we can't look around us and see it does work. I mean, that's going back to the very beginning with the society. If we just had an engine, it's not a car. All the parts, if you put them together, they make a car.
Yeah, and then there's a higher level of resolution with the car.
Right.
And then, like, maybe we're just parts that make up the society that stands above us.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. And we make up a society that's much bigger than us. Our society makes up the planet, which is a lot bigger than the societies. I think that's a good way to look at it. And yeah, that's the big way. That's the best I can describe it. So if we just look at ourselves and say, "Oh, we're just a bunch of atoms," that really subtracts a lot of what we've done, what we've accomplished, what we really are.
Yeah. Okay. So should we see it from that perspective of emergence, or should we just see it as levels of resolution that each have their own kind of distinct validity?
Would you be able to provide an example of that second one?
Yeah, like something like the level of analysis of viewing the world as a place of human beings acting is a valid way to see the world.
Right.
And we don't have to see that way of seeing the world as just a mere, or maybe not just a mere, but even an emergence from the atomic world. Like, it's just like if you lived your whole life and society lived its entire course, only viewing life as human beings interacting in the world and never kind of conceiving of an atomic perspective.
Oh.
Like, wouldn't they be?
Would
they be missing something, or would that be?
I think I see what you mean.
Yeah. Would they be missing something?
I don't exactly see a difference between the two. I mean, if you look at a colony of ants, you don't really care about the individual ants.
Yeah. So you don't think they would really be missing anything?
No. If you're looking at a whole society, it's looking at one individual. It's not going to change too much about it, I don't believe.
Yeah. So we have this level of we have this hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right? Where we have the atoms, then we have maybe the internal parts that work together inside the human body, and we have and so if we have this kind of structure, where does morality fit into that? This just seems like a place of things that seem to stack up in higher levels of resolution. But how do we get to morality?
I think morality is entirely separate from that.
Can it be physically manifested, or is it immaterial in some sense? How does that work?
I don't think morality is any sort of material or physical manifestation.
Okay.
I think going back to the religion thing, morality is something entirely different. And while it may have some real-world consequences, it's not exactly something you can just interact with.
Okay.
That's the best I can describe it.
Okay, so it's almost like the wind.
Pretty much.
Kind of like what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Okay. But someone might say, oh, well, the wind can just be, that's an analogy. So I can't try to reduce it.
It's like a double analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, morality would be theoretically sourced from God, so it would make sense to compare it to the wind, right?
Right.